What it'll do is it'll just say, oh, okay, because I've started the server up and because it's working and has access to these APIs, and then it's going to go and research me and use the API, but it's going to do it naturally. So imagine you have a workflow and you have an MCP that allows you to iterate through a CSV of things. So imagine I had like a CSV of 50 profiles. I could just go load this in and it will return all this data for me. Hey there, I'm going to show you how I set up an MCP server for Enrich B2B. So first of all, I had a bit of trouble getting Claude Desktop to talk to my local files. I think it's because I use PyPy instead of UV for packages and running Python and stuff. But eventually I got there. A good old cursor helped me through it. But essentially I had to set the arguments in a specific way where it can call my server file, which you can see here. And this is all available in a public GitHub branch, which you're more than welcome to follow and use. It should be fairly simple if you just follow all of the kind of step-by-steps. But essentially, one really key thing that I did was look at the MCP logs a lot. When it doesn't quite work, they have a logging file, which you can find somewhere in here, I think it is. But it will show up anyway. So to get started, you want to just check out Claude, and you want to go to Settings. And you'll see here there's some stuff called File System and LinkedIn Research. Now, what you're going to be doing is you want to go to Edit Config and load up this JSON file. And then what you'll be able to do is you'll see that you'll be able to throw in something like this, where eventually let me have a look. So how would you get this started? You go to Claude and you go to Settings, you go to Edit Config, and you have a file, you double click that. You're going to be brought up with a text editor that is a JSON file that looks something like this. And so what you want to enter in is your server name and enter in your paths to wherever you're hosting your code, but storing it somewhere simple is usually good. I have a folder called cursor coding, just on my root user. And then I created a new folder, and then I have to have a server.py in there. And so what we're doing here is we're setting a command, which is what we want the MCP to execute. And then I use Venv and Python and PyPy to change some stuff around. But the argument is to just basically set up the server.py, which is when every time Claude Desktop starts, it will just run this server. And then you have to give it some environment, which is, I have to add Python path for some reason, I'm not too sure why. And then the API keys, such as the Enrich B2B key and the others that are up here. So you can just store that in there. And this is the example that I've given on mine. Okay, so let's imagine you've set this up now. You've changed your file here, and you've added in your MCP server. Then what you want to do is you want to save that file and close off of Claude, and then you want to reload it. Now it's either going to reload or it's going to have like errors coming up on the top right. Now when you click on the errors, there should be some logs, so that should be okay to go and throw into Cursor or Claude chat and say what's going on here. You can see here that we have got some functions, which is get profile details from LinkedIn Research, and we've also got get contact activities from Enrich B2B. And it's super interesting because all of a sudden, if I go and get my profile, then I can just all of a sudden say, hey, can you research, please, and get one page of activities. And then what it'll do is it'll just say, oh, okay, because I've started the server up and because it's working and has access to these APIs, allow for this chat. And then it's going to go and research me and use the API, but it's going to do it naturally. So imagine you have a workflow and you have an MCP that allows you to iterate through a CSV of things. You can upload a file and say, run this through this thing. So imagine I had like a CSV of 50 profiles. I could just go load this in and it will return all this data for me. So the get profile details already here, so you can expand this and you can see all of the data. And then you get to work really naturally with, you can see my MCP and AI communication here, within Claude or within a workflow that you're currently using. So if I'm doing I think this becomes really effective when like you are in the middle of something and you're like, oh, I want to just pair these two things together. So a bit of LinkedIn data, and imagine, because I've got the file storage thing, I could just say, can you create a file in downloads? And the thing is that now you are not limited by just moving your mouse and typing. Like the LLM will do the grunt work because it's been programmed to put this together. But yeah, essentially that's how you do it. And I think Next steps for this would be adding in more functionality and getting a bit more clear and clinical about the type of functions and the tools and what they're used for, which you can find in how we explain, so we can see it a bit better. If we go to my Enrich B2B API, we've got good explainers in all of the code. And so then if we look in the server, we can then see that when we're creating accesses to these APIs, we're using a lot of context to aim the AI towards the right MCP route. But yeah, essentially that's how you do it, and it's quite interesting. Yeah, you can see I have successfully just turned this into a markdown file that the LLM had access to my computer. And this is obviously one of those dangerous things where you got to be careful where you give it access to, because if someone uploads an MCP server and you're like, oh, that sounds good, and underneath they have this random little function that's delete all files that you haven't seen because you don't know how to code or you haven't seen it, I think it could be quite problematic. So I would bear that in mind as well, as not every MCP server is good. Yeah, nonetheless, just to summarize, being able to access LinkedIn data like this inside an LLM is crazy good. And I can see loads of things that I would be building inside this extra. So I would be like, here's a CSV, go and research in full all of them. And then what I would also be doing is I would be building out functions like research all, where we're calling the CSV file, and we're calling like research each profile, get all interactions, create a mind map of content ideas. And then finally, it will create like a large report or something. And being able to call this all at the touch of a thought or something is really crazy. Yeah, really excited about this stuff. I really like it. So yeah, hopefully that was useful. If you have any questions, let me know, because this is probably very crazy and hectic.